Hey, Chattajackers. I wanted to talk to you a little bit this week about training your endurance for an event like Chattajack. So it's a minimum 5 hour race. It could be up to 8.5 hours. So obviously, endurance is a key component of preparation for this race. It's probably the biggest, most important thing to train if you are looking at finishing well, and you don't have a lot of time to cover all of the different elements that you need to train. You had better make sure that you've trained your endurance. So then the question is, how do we most effectively train endurance for a race like Chattajack? And the first thing I'd like to say is that it's not a process that can be shortcutted, right? There are no shortcuts. You've got to be doing your training as far in advance of this race as possible. So ideally, right, you're training for Chattajack in 2025, started shortly after Chattajack, like within a month after the completion of Chattajack in 2024. And in an ideal scenario, you start with a really good off season of a lot of land-based aerobic work. It doesn't have to be high level work. It doesn't have to be level 4 threshold, that type of thing. We're talking level 2, level 3. So maximum of sort of 75% of max, 75% heart rate. A lot of, the 60 to 75% zone. And, putting in as many aerobic hours as you can, doing something aerobic 6 days a week, minimum sort of 30 minutes a workout, some workouts up to an hour, 80 minutes maybe in duration. That's the ideal. A lot of you won't have as much time to do that type of training, so you do less, but you do what you can. And then when you get into the spring, when you're able to get back in the water, you start to change some of the land-based work you're doing to water work, and you're doing the same type of work on the water. 60 to 90 minutes in the water, 6 days a week, ideally. Long intervals, so intervals where the work to rest ratio is like sort of minimum 5-to-1 work to rest, and as much as 20, 25, 30-to-1. So a lot of steady nonstop paddling, or paddling where you're shifting gears between sort of level 2, level 3. And that's the bulk of your endurance training. The really interesting thing about training endurance is you don't have to go super hard. You don't have to be in high-end level 3, level 4, training at threshold to develop aerobic fitness. There are adaptations that occur in the individual muscle fibers that you're using that enhance aerobic performance. Okay, so the three main adaptations that occur is within the muscle fibers that you're using, you will develop more mitochondria, which is the site where the production of ATP by aerobic means that is used for muscle contraction occurs. You will increase the enzyme activity involved in aerobic metabolism within those muscle fibers. You'll also increase or improve the oxygen carrying capacity within these muscle fiber cells. So by increasing the amount of myoglobin in the muscle fibers. So myoglobin is analogous to what hemoglobin is in the bloodstream. Hemoglobin carries oxygen within the bloodstream to the cell membrane, the muscle cell membrane, the muscle fiber membrane. And that's where myoglobin will pick up the oxygen, carry it to the mitochondria, where energy, or ATP, can be produced by aerobic means. So these adaptations occur at low intensities, 60 to 70 to 75%. It's not so much a function of intensity for getting these adaptations, but it's more a function of time. So 30 minutes is good, an hour is better, an hour and a half is better than an hour, 2 hours is better than an hour and a half. So, you know, you're doing this type of work and you're building your endurance. At some point in your preparation, you are going to have to change to more intense work because we've talked about a well-periodized program. You need to periodically change the main training stimulus. And at some point, too, as you get deeper into the season, you're going to start to do longer paddles. But the idea is that you're doing your homework on a consistent day-to-day basis for a long period of time. If that's what you've been doing in your preparation to this point, you're really well set up. If, though, however, you haven't been able to train in that way up to this point, and you're looking at it and thinking, geez, there's only 14 weeks left till Chattajack. What do I do? Can I be ready for it? The answer to that is yes, you can. But you need to start working on your endurance now. And you need to start this day-to-day approach. It's not enough. You can't cram training like you can arguably cram for an exam and still pass the exam. You can't cram training. So you can't just do a few long paddles, like 4, 5, 6 hour paddles, and be ready for a race like Chattajack. You might be able to finish the race because you've done some long paddles, but you're not training to thrive in the race when you do that. So the best approach would be to start now, training at least 4 days a week, where you're doing sort of 60 to 90 minutes of time on the water, and you're doing long intervals where you're training kind of level 2 to 3, 10-minute intervals, 15-minute intervals, 20-minute intervals, maybe even as low as 5-minute intervals, but you're taking only a brief rest, like a minute rest, sort of maximum. And you're doing 40 to 60 minutes of work, total work, within each workout. You may be on the water for 80 to 90 minutes, but you're doing 60 minutes of time in zone. And the idea is to be consistent with this and to try to do it, 4 times a week if you possibly can. 5 times a week would be better. 6 times a week would be better still. That's the key to developing your endurance. And if you start now and work on that type of schedule through to the race, you're going to have a pretty good base, and you'll be able to finish, and you'll be able to, I think, feel strong through most of the race. But imagine if you've been doing that all year, how much better prepared you will be, right? And you can think about that. If you're starting late this year, you can think about that for next year, because it will make a big difference. So that's the first thing you need to do. And that's the most important thing to do, that day-to-day consistency. But it is a long race, and you do need to know that you can paddle for a long period of time and maintain an effective pace. So you do need to as well do some long paddles. So I would suggest doing 1 long paddle a week. I would suggest doing it at the end of your training week. So if you start your training on Monday and you work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it would be the Saturday workout where you do the long paddle, because then you have Sunday off and then you can start again fresh on Monday. And I would suggest that for most people, you don't need to do more than 4 hours, 4.5 maximum. You can start, if we're 14 weeks out from Chattajack, you can start with doing a 2-hour paddle. The next week you can do 2.5 hours. The third week I usually take as a recovery week. I cut the work back a little bit, so you might do 1.5 hours. Then in the 4th week you could do a 3-hour paddle. The 5th week a 3.5-hour paddle. The 6th week would be another recovery week. I would cut the load back to maybe 1.5 hours again, but I'd be building up over time so that I was working towards a 4.5-hour or a couple of 4.5-hour paddles once a week. And the purpose of those paddles is to get you used to a pace that you can sustain for long periods of time. The purpose is to have your body used to working for those longer periods of time. And another big purpose of these longer workouts is for you to practice the fueling and the hydration that you will need for a longer time on the water. These 1.5 hour workouts or 60 to 1.5 minute, 60 minute to 1.5 hour workouts aren't really long enough to test your fueling. Like, you can bang out those workouts without taking any water without taking any fuel with you, and you can complete them just fine. But when you start going over an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours or more, you're going to need to fuel, and you're going to need to fuel in Chattajack. And the time to practice your fueling is when you are doing your training, so that when you get to the race, you can have complete confidence in the way you're fueling for that race. You can have confidence in the fueling and hydration schedule, like when you're going to take your drinks, when you're going to take your fuel, what type of fuel you're going to take, even what product of fuel you're going to take. Because some people tolerate certain products really well and they don't tolerate other products well. And you don't want to find yourself on the race course with a upset tummy because you didn't choose a product that you could tolerate. So you want to be doing these workouts once a week. And I don't think you should be doing them more than that. I think if you try to do them more than that, or if you try to do a workout that's longer than 4.5 hours, you're doing too much. And the reason I say that is because when you start doing such high volume, you need more recovery time. And that recovery time that you need is going to eat into the day-to-day stuff, which is the backbone of your training. Okay? Like if you do something really long and you need more recovery time, you're going to miss a training day that was part of your day-to-day work, which is most important. So that's the way I would approach endurance training for a race like Chattajack, and that's the way I would approach it if you're looking at it now and saying, geez, I only have 14 weeks. How am I going to prepare for this race? That's what I would suggest. Now, in future weeks, we're going to look at the other qualities and abilities that you need for this race, and we're going to talk about training threshold, training speed, and you're going to have to fit time for those things into your day-to-day routine as well. So it's going to turn out that when your program intensifies, you're going to have less time to work on your base in the week because you got to fit these other things in as well. So that's why it's all the more important to start to train your endurance in the way I've just described as soon as possible, like ideally as soon as you see this video, right? So if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them in the comments. I will read the comments. I'll be happy to answer the questions that you have in as much detail as I possibly can. If you have a question that you are a little bit concerned about and you really don't want other people to see your question, feel free to reach out to me in messages and I'll provide you with a detailed answer to your question there. But I'll leave it with, it's an endurance race. You got to train your endurance. You got to start now because the longer build-up time you have working on your endurance, the better. And so you can take the advice that I've provided you here, and you can start to build that into your program. And if you got any questions, please reach out and ask, and I'll be happy to help you. Okay? Happy training.